Number 11. Carolyn and Marielle Winand. Police officers in Naples, Florida responded to a noise complaint at the home of realtor Carolyn Winand in March of 2014. Upon making their way to the address, they found that the woman's 18-year-old daughter, Marielle, had been throwing a raucous party. The Naples Daily News reported that the teenager was helped to the doors by two friends because she was so intoxicated that she could barely stand. Officers contacted 56-year-old Carolyn, who told them she was out of town, and expressed surprise at the occurrence, giving law enforcement permission to clear her house. They proceeded to do so, but aside from finding over 24 teens inside, the police also found Carolyn hiding out in a bedroom. She defended the party, claiming it was safer with her around, but the police took her into custody, along with Marielle. Both were charged with hosting an open house party, a misdemeanor, but Carolyn also faced 26 counts of selling, giving, or serving alcohol to a minor. Collier County jail records indicated that she was released on a bond of $53,000. Number 10. Mamie and Whitley Smith. In May of 2022, a mother-daughter duo was arrested in Sumter County, South Carolina, after launching an attack on several middle school students. As reported by Sumter authorities, Mamie and Whitley Smith went to Ebenezer Middle School to confront a child who'd allegedly been bullying one of their family members. They asked for access at the front door and claimed they were heading to the attendance office. 67-year-old Mamie and Whitley, aged 37, then ran down the hall and charged the student they'd identified as the bully. They pushed the unnamed girl against a wall before hitting and scratching her in the face and head. Two more students were reportedly assaulted until staff and a resource officer were able to detain the duo. Local officers arrived at the scene and arrested the women on charges of third-degree assault by mob and disturbing schools. They risked up to a year in jail if convicted on the former charge. As of the latest updates on the matter, their bond was set at $10,000, but it wasn't clear if they had an attorney to speak for them. Number 9. Bryce and Daryl Hedrick. An unnamed police officer in Huntington Beach, California, pulled over two men as they were riding their bicycles at Beach Boulevard and Clay Drive on February the 9th of 2016. The suspects were later identified as 23-year-old Bryce Hedrick and his father Daryl, then in his late 50s. During the stop, the older man hit the officer in the head from behind, and after he dropped to the ground, both he and Bryce began repeatedly punching and kicking him. The officer's daughter, who'd been riding along in the cruiser, witnessed the brutal beatdown. The two men ultimately got back on their bikes and pedaled away. The officer, who'd reportedly lost consciousness at some point during the attack, regained his senses and afterwards received treatment for non-life-threatening injuries, including a concussion, at a local hospital. The 17-year veteran of the force was subsequently cleared to return to work. Bryce and Daryl were arrested shortly after the attack. They each pleaded guilty to one felony count of aggravated assault on a peace officer and one misdemeanor count of resisting and obstructing an officer. The father and son were sentenced to 6 and 7 years in prison, respectively. Number 8. Cassandra Kerr and Conchetta Didiano. 40-year-old Cassandra Kerr and her daughter, Conchetta Didiano, were arrested by Florida authorities in 2018 for attempting to deliver contraband into a prison via a drone. A guard at the Martin Correctional Institute in Indiantown spotted the aircraft flying over the facility's rooftop at around Christmas time. Staff alerted the sheriff's office, who located the women driving around the facility and took them into custody shortly before 2 a.m. According to an arrest report, Kerr told law enforcement, "I did it," indicating that the remote and iPad she had used to operate the drone were in the back seat of the car. She and 22-year-old Didiano planned to deliver cell phones and tobacco to Kerr's husband, who was an inmate at the prison. The woman was charged with introducing contraband into a correctional facility, while her daughter was charged with aiding in the crime. Number 7. Amber March and Martha Masetki. On the evening of March the 22nd of 2016, police in Lawton, Oklahoma, executed a search warrant at the home of Amber March in connection to an ongoing drug trafficking investigation. They found a little over a gram of methamphetamine, drug paraphernalia, digital scales, and baggies, as well as firearms in the form of a .45 caliber Glock 30 and a Rossi .38 Special. The woman wasn't home at the time, and after searching the residence, officers decided to wait for her to return. March and her mother, Martha Masetki, eventually went back to the address where they were met by the police. The former was arrested for possession of methamphetamine with the intent to distribute, possession of drug paraphernalia, and for possession of a firearm after a former felony conviction. Officers would soon learn that she hadn't been working alone. Upon interviewing Mahetsky, she admitted to have also been part of the drug operation, and she was arrested on similar charges as her daughters. Number 6. Joseph and Jashem Fearon. In late January of 2016, a father and son were arrested in Long Island, New York City, for running a massive drug operation out of a luxury apartment in an upscale neighborhood. The authorities served a search warrant at the Coram address where they found $200,000 in cash and over 2.2 pounds of illicit substances worth an estimated $60,000. 40-year-old Joseph Fearon and his son Jashem, aged 23, both of whom had prior convictions, were taken into custody. The raid was part of a new initiative that allowed the Precinct Special Operations Team to execute search warrants. It was meant to enable a quicker response from the police department to areas where drug activity was reported. Then Suffolk County Police Commissioner Timothy Sinai stated that the latest operation had resulted in taking 2 very bad guys off the street. Joseph Fearon faced an extensive list of drug-related charges, while his son was charged with 5th-degree criminal possession of a controlled substance and 2nd-degree criminal impersonation. Number 5. Scott, Hayden, and Abby Catt. After losing his wife to breast cancer in the late 1990s, Ronald Scott Catt became addicted to drugs and alcohol while also struggling to provide for his young children, Hayden and Abigail. In spite of his addictions, Scott was regarded as a respected member of his McMinnville, Oregon community and a devoted single father to his children. However, unbeknownst to his family or anyone else, Scott led a double life as a bank robber. His father had been a loan officer in a bank, so Scott had gained intimate knowledge of the financial building's inner workings, understanding that the money was insured and that the employees had been primarily instructed to cooperate in case of a threat. The first bank he robbed was the same one for which his father had worked, only a few blocks from where he was living in McMinnville. From 2000 to 2002, Scott would hit various banks whenever the financial need arose, ultimately committing 5 robberies in the Portland area. During one of them, in 2010, he realized he'd need help and also considered that working with a partner would increase profits, as he could reach the vault. Scott didn't trust anyone aside from family, so he asked Hayden, then in his late teens, to help with what he described as his part-time job. Hayden reluctantly agreed and even joined Scott in case in a bank, but was ultimately too nervous to go through with it. His father robbed the bank alone anyway, changing his son's perspective on the job's dangers and difficulty. In 2012, Scott, Hayden, and Abigail began a new life in Texas. Scott had convinced his daughter to help him and Hayden with robbing banks, all the while maintaining the appearance of familial normalcy. On August the 8th, the 2 men entered a bank in Harris County, armed with realistic-looking airsoft guns, while wearing hats, sunglasses, and surgical masks. After the robbery, they were driven away by Abigail, who'd been waiting behind the wheel of the family's Volkswagen Jetta that had stolen plates taped over its real ones. On November the 8th, the Cats robbed the First Community Credit Union in Katy. Because construction was taking place nearby, Scott and Hayden wore bright orange vests. Upon making their way into the bank, they robbed it, and once again, 18-year-old Abigail acted as the getaway driver. Together, the trio had made $170,000 from the 2 robberies. They were eventually arrested after the police had tracked down the orange vests they'd worn in the heist to a Home Depot, reviewing surveillance footage as well as credit card information. Scott and Hayden were taken into custody without incident, as they were reportedly planning their 3rd and 4th robberies in the area, while Abigail surrendered shortly thereafter. She and Hayden were given a 5 and a 10-year sentence respectively, after pleading guilty to aggravated robbery. Scott was sentenced to 24 years in prison on the same charge. Number 4. Floyd and Jason Bebby. Florida men Floyd and Jason Bebby earned attention online in recent years through their mugshots, both of which showed the father and son sporting distinctive forehead tattoos. 48-year-old Floyd was arrested in 2007 and eventually convicted on charges of burglary and theft. He had the words "Get R done" tattooed on his forehead and "Got R did" on the back of his head. Floyd's son Jason was arrested at a different date on the same year for unspecified crimes, and his mugshot showed the 21-year-old with the word "psycho" inked on his forehead. While not visible in his processing photo, Jason also reportedly had the F word and you tattooed on each eyelid. Number 3. Paul and Ruben Flores. In May of 1996, at the end of her freshman year at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, Kristen Smart attended a friend's birthday party. At around 2 a.m. on May the 25th, she was found passed out on a campus lawn, and 2 classmates started helping her back to her dorm room. They were joined by another student, Paul Flores, who claimed he'd get 19-year-old Smart to her accommodation safely because his dorm was close to hers. He told the others, "Don't worry, I have her." But Smart was never seen again. On the 6th year anniversary of her disappearance, the teenager was declared legally dead. Paul wasn't immediately charged in connection to the incident, but as the years passed, evidence started indicating that he'd assaulted and killed Smart before covering up the crime with the help of his father, Ruben, in 2020. The authorities searched Paul's home in San Pedro, California, and found drugs used to sedate someone, as well as homemade videos of him abusing multiple young women in a file titled Practice. The following year, in March, the police searched Ruben's home with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar devices. Based on biological evidence, the authorities suspected that Smart had been buried beneath the deck of his home, but had recently been removed. In April of 2021, nearly 25 years since the student's disappearance, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department arrested Paul on murder charges and his father for being an accessory. The case was deemed solid enough to go to trial, but a date hadn't yet been established as of April 2022. Number 2. Mahek and Azreen Bukhari. In the early hours of February the 11th of 2022, Hashim Ijazuddin and Saqib Hussain, both aged 21, were traveling together in a Skoda Fabia on the A46 in Leicestershire, England. At some point during the drive, one of them called the emergency services, and a loud scream was heard. Before the call disconnected, the Skoda was then ripped apart after swerving across the road and hitting a central reservation barrier. The 2 men were believed to have been chased down by 2 other vehicles, but the reasons remained unspecified as of the latest information released to the media by the police. TikTok star Mahek Bukhari and her mother, 45-year-old Ansreen, were charged with double murder, along with 6 other people, all reported as being in their 20s. Mahek boasted a following of 128,000 on the platform and claimed to have an elite relationship with her mother, who appeared in some of her videos. Earlier in January, a clip showed Mahek pretending to casually tell another person that she'd killed someone, as It'll Be Okay by Shawn Mendes played over the clip. She'd also spoken about having beef with other influencers, but it's unclear how and if that aspect was connected to the deaths of Ijazuddin and Hussain. As of mid-May 2022, Mahek and Ansreen had entered not guilty pleas. Number 1. Anthony and Manuel Velasquez. In the fall of 2021, a father and son were taken into custody by a Los Angeles County SWAT team after they were linked to 3 shooting deaths that occurred in East Los Angeles. 31-year-old Anthony Velasquez was arrested on suspicion of murder, while his father, Manuel, was detained for allegedly acting as an accessory. Anthony was tied to the fatal shooting of Jesus Avalos in the early morning hours of February the 11th of 2014. The victim was found sitting in the driver's seat of his 1995 Toyota 4Runner after he'd been shot in the head and chest through the window. A year later, on July the 6th, a man believed by detectives to have been Anthony gunned down 38-year-old Eduardo Robles after they'd earlier engaged in a physical altercation. In the early morning hours of April the 22nd of 2018, a man wearing a ski mask approached a tent pitched on 3rd Street, in which 27-year-old Amanda Nicole Lopez lived. The culprit, suspected as Anthony, unzipped it and opened fire inside, killing Lopez. He then fled into a PT Cruiser later tied to Velasquez. The father was believed to have acted as a getaway for at least another of the killings attributed to his son. The latter's specific relationship to the victims remained unspecified. Commenting on the unusual aspect of a father and son committing murder together, Lieutenant Hugo Renaga told a media outlet, "Usually fathers protect their kids," before adding that Manuel's interpretation of that ideal was to keep his son out of prison. Thanks for watching. Would you rather teach your parents how to use new technology or have a detailed talk with them about your intimate life? Let us know in the comments section below.